Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of our little CFL Free Agent Frenzy positional preview series here on the Canadian Football Countdown. I'm Ryan, here every day this week, bringing you a new positional preview, taking a look at the top free agents available, the teams with needs, looking to bring some of those guys in, all leading up to our big live free agent frenzy show, February 14th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We'll be live for 8 full hours of live coverage and analysis of the official opening of CFL Free Agency. There's a flurry of activity. We're going to break it all down every hour as it happens. You can join us live on pretty much any platform you normally catch the show on. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and the Game Time TV YouTube page. Thanks to our presenting sponsor. Just search the Canadian Football Countdown or at CF Countdown Pod on all of those platforms. Make sure you subscribe ahead of time. Follow us on social media there. And it's going to be a fun day and really looking forward to it. But also looking forward to talking about the wide receivers here today. So let's get set up to do that here and switch over to our free agent tracker. Now let's take a look first at where all the teams are currently at the position here. 5 or so days until the official opening of free agency, including a couple pending moves that have been made during the CFL's negotiation window. Start off with taking a look at the BC Lions here. The Lions, had a pretty good year offensively last year with quarterback Nathan Rourke at the helm, and the receivers were a big part of that as well. I mean, you look at Dominic Rhymes, Keon Hatcher, Lucky Whitehead as the top three. Javon Catoy is a solid Canadian piece there. The one notable missing would be Brian Burnham, who did retire back in December. So that is a big hole to fill, missing Brian Burnham there for sure. I'm interested to see if this is a position the Lions try to make a move at, or do they go and, take a look at the likes of Alexander Hollins, who kind of stepped in when Burnham was out due to injury down the stretch, and played decently well in a couple of games there. Jacob Scarfoni got in for a little bit of time in near the end of the season. Josh Pearson looked good in a couple of games he played. Daniel Peterman, bounced around rosters a little bit here and there. So the Lions are a team I could see not making a move, or I could see them bringing in another piece potentially here just to replace the absence of Brian Burnham. If we take a look at the Calgary Stampeders, Malik Henry, Reggie Begelton. I mean, that's a pretty stellar top two wide receivers you have there. Over 1,000 yards for Henry, a breakout season for him. Begelton, 957 yards for him, a solid season there. And then they've got a bunch of, young, good Canadian talent there. Luther Hakunavanu's looked pretty solid, over the past couple of seasons. He finally got into more playing time this past year, put up 330 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jalen Philpott is one of those receivers that a breakout year is coming as soon as he starts getting more usage. And I think this is probably the year we're seeing that. 23 years of age, had a very good rookie season for him last year, pitching in on the return, in the rushing category, in the receiving category, kind of following that a little bit of a Nick Dembski type mold for a Canadian wide receiver. I think Jalen Philpott's going to be a huge piece for the Calgary Stampeders this upcoming season. Devontae Dukes played a couple of games down the stretch. Colton Hunchak's been, around with the team for a couple of years there, spelled in a little bit when injuries happened. Same with Tyson Middlemost. These are a couple of guys that haven't really been prominent pieces in the offense, but they've been contributing here and there. So, notable subtractions here for the Stampeders would be Kamar Jordan, who is currently a free agent, Richie Sindani, who's currently a free agent. I think they have the Canadian talent that they'll be fine without Sindani. I do wonder if the Stampeders look to bring in another big name player, though, to fill the gap left behind by Kamar Jordan. I could see this being something the Stampeders do. But also it is John Huffnagel, and now I guess it is Dave Dickinson, and they are known to just try to find their diamonds in the rough and not make big splashes at free agency time. The Edmonton Elks are going to look a little bit different at wide receiver this coming into this year than they did last year. Kenny Lawler looks like he's set to go off to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Darrell Walker remains to be a free agent there for them. But they've already signed a couple of guys pending, of course. They have to wait till the free agency window officially opens. But Stephen Dunbar looks to be brought in from Hamilton on a 2-year contract, 1,000-yard receiver for him last year. Kyron Moore over from Saskatchewan also being brought in. 7 games last year, only had a lot of injury issues, but he's had some very good seasons in his career. So I think those are 2 great additions that the Elks have made. I like the direction they're going here, and I'm very high on Dylan Mitchell. I mean, Mitchell came in the second half of the season, only played 9 games, but put up 637 yards. He was one of the top fantasy options when it came to the wide receiver slot down the second half of the season there. I think we're going to see him take even more steps forward here and be a focal point of this Edmonton offense. And you've got the really strong veteran presence leadership of a guy like Manny Arsenault, who's been in the league since 2009 and is still able to contribute there. So I like that as kind of the veteran calming presence in this wide receiver core. You look at the Canadian talent, I think that's a spot where maybe either the Elks, give one of these young guys a shot. Vincent Forbes-Montbleau, Daniel Vandervoort, Gavin Cobb. I know that's a guy who rookie season last year, I believe maybe had some injuries, so couldn't get into the lineup, but was a guy that the Elks are very high on at wide receivers. So could we see him take the next step, or do the Elks look to bring in some talent from wide at the Canadian level in free agency? The Ticats are a team I think needs some help at wide receiver. Tim White is a free agent, supposedly asking for $240,000. Stephen Dunbar is headed off to the Elks. And Hamilton's a team that I felt was lacking depth across the board on offense last season. And they got hit pretty hard with injuries, and I think that was a tough point for them certainly there as well. You look at the guys currently under roster. I mean, the one to play the most games here was Keandre Smith, who only put up 247 yards over that span of time. Braylon Addison missed over half the season. Poppy White missed over half the season. And Anthony Johnson only spelling in for 5 games there as well. So, they've had some injury issues. I think they need some depth at wide receiver. I do like some of these young pieces, though. If you look at the Canadians here, Keandre Smith, Tyler Ternowski, these are 2 guys that are pretty young, still 23, 25 years of age. I think Smith showed signs that he could potentially be a kind of a breakout receiver in the future here as well. It was his rookie season last year. He played a couple very good games there, I think late in the season as well. So, they've got some younger pieces here that perhaps they could develop, turn into those next big receivers. But I do think the Ticats are a team that's going to need to go out and get one of the biggest fish in free agency here, especially with all the money they're spending at other positions. Bring in Levi Mitchell, bringing in James Butler at running back supposedly. If they can bring in a top tier wide receiver or 2, that's going to make this offense a very exciting one to watch coming into this year, because I think that's what they need to focus on. Their defense wasn't too bad last year. Their offense struggled to put points on the board at times and put the yardage up. So Braylon Addison, top tier receiver when he's healthy. He just hasn't been healthy enough in the past couple of years where I'm willing to bank on him as kind of the go-to top number 1 guy for them. I think he is still a top number 1 guy. I just don't know if he should be the only one in that category. So let's see if the Ticats go out and make a splash as they try to push to win the Grey Cup while hosting it at home. The Alouettes are another team that I think has some big concerns at wide receiver. Eugene Lewis, arguably one of, if not the top wide receiver in the CFL, seems to be a free agent headed elsewhere. Negotiations went south with the Alouettes and him, and looks like he will be leaving this offseason. Jake Winicky, their number 2 receiver, heading off to the Saskatchewan Roughriders is being reported. Reggie White Jr., also a free agent. currently. So their top 3 receivers from this past season, all currently free agents, potentially not coming back. And, they need some big names. They need some depth. This is a position that I think the Alouettes have to focus on this offseason. I do like a few of the pieces. Kyle Julian Grant, Tyson Philpott. I think that they're pretty set at the Canadian wide receiver spot. 500 yards, 450 between them. That's something I think they have a good. They're one of the stronger teams in that category. But otherwise, at wide receiver, we need a couple more pieces in there. Cole Speaker, shown in the preseason and I think in a meaningless game down the stretch last year, maybe he gets a little more of an opportunity. Chandler Worthy, primarily used in the return game. Does he get a little more involvement on offense also? Those are things we could potentially see here. But even with that, let's see what the Alouettes can bring in at wide receiver in free agency. The Ottawa Red Blacks, they've got a couple mainstays coming back from last year. They've got a couple of young pieces that we only saw kind of the beginnings of later in the season as the season kind of spiraled out of control for them. They started to fall a little bit out of the playoff race there. Guys got injured. They got some other guys in for more opportunities. Jalen Acklin, fantastic season as the go-to guy over in Ottawa. 1,169 yards for him, 2 touchdowns. So 2 touchdowns only is a little bit surprising given how many yards he put up and how many receptions he had. But the offense just didn't put points on the board. Nate Behar, one of the top Canadian receivers in the CFL. Justin Hardy, down the stretch, only played 7 games, but he looked like he could be a real breakout guy. A little surprising, it seems he's coming onto the scene now. His rookie year was in 2022. He's 31 years of age, so he's a little up there in age already for wide receivers. But he's making a name for himself at the end of last season, and we'll see if he can continue that this year. Same thing with Sayosi Mariner. Few games there for him, couple nice catches, couple promising opportunities for him down the stretch. But I think the Red Blacks could be a team also that goes out and makes a move for more of a depth piece, maybe a number 2, number 3 wide receiver coming into this offseason here as well. Or, I've been suggesting this all along, Devontae Dedmon. He's been primarily used in the return game, and he is such an explosive player, such a speed player that you could put him at wide receiver, chuck the ball down the field, and he'll probably outrun almost anybody to the end zone. So I would love to see more involvement from him on the offense there. And just as we were scrolling lower in the list, a name that stands out here is Quan Bray. He had a couple really good seasons with the Montreal Alouettes. Obviously, he had some legal troubles as well, which ended up taking him out of the league for a couple of years there. And looks like he's cleared to come back, and the Red Blacks have taken a chance on him here. And, he didn't jump out at the top because he didn't have any stats from last season, but that could be a guy that fills in that number 2, number 3 slot I was just talking about. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are going to look pretty darn different, I think, at wide receiver this year. I mean, Kyron Moore's off to Edmonton. Shaq Evans looks to be on the way out. Duke Williams, potentially on the way out as a free agent here as well. They've got Keon Schaefer-Baker currently coming back. He put up 960 yards last year. He also got about 12 NFL workouts this offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a guy that ends up getting a shot down south and taking it. With that many workouts, you would expect somebody would maybe take a chance on him in the NFL there. So that leaves them with a lot of question marks at wide receiver. They've filled one of the spots already by bringing in Jake Wieneke. I think that's a great addition for them there. But then, basically the rest of their starting lineup is out the door. You've got Braden Lenius, really good Canadian option there for them. Tevin Jones had a couple of games where maybe he looked like he could produce if given a starting role here. But other than that, it's pretty thin at wide receiver. Currently under contract for the Riders, Mario Alford. Again, another guy, much like Chandler Worthy, Devontae Dedmon, mostly used in the return game. Could they use him a little bit more on offense? I thought I saw reports that maybe that's something the Riders will be looking to do this year, which excites me. But also, like, the Riders are a team that are going to be spending big in free agency this year, and I expect wide receiver to be a position that is one of those focal points, given all of the pieces that seem to be on the way out. The Toronto Argonauts managed to lock up two of their biggest pieces over the past week or two. Curly Gittens Jr. is one of the most exciting Canadian, one of the most exciting receivers in general in the CFL. Just 25 years of age, put up 1,100 yards last season, 5 touchdowns. I think him and Nick Dembski and Keon Schaefer-Baker are the top 3 Canadian wide receivers in the CFL, and I'm really excited to see what Curly Gittens Jr. can do as a follow-up to this coming season. They also brought back Tavares Daniels. He had a really good year, 860 yards for him there. And they've got a couple of pieces in Cam Phillips and DeMonte Coxey that didn't play full seasons, but also, didn't look too bad in the time they were playing there. Obviously, DeMonte Coxey here, the catch rate, just 42% of his targets being caught there. That is a bit of a concern, I would say, but he seemed to have some flashes in a few of those games there. This is a team, I think, though, that we could see maybe add another piece or two in free agency. They've let go Brandon Banks. Eric Rogers didn't really get into often last year and is a free agent there. Markeith Ambles is also a free agent. So I think the Argos are missing a piece or two at wide receiver here, but I think they did lock up the most important ones. And finally, a team that I think is well set going into next year with wide receivers is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Dalton Schoen, a breakout rookie of the year, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns for the Bombers. Who could have seen that coming last year? Certainly not me. And many expect him to go to the NFL this offseason, but he only got a couple of workouts, has not signed there, and it seems likely that Dalton Schoen could be coming back to the Bombers again this season. The Bombers also managed to bring back Nick Dembski on a 3-year contract extension. Such a versatile piece, one of the most utilized pieces in that offense. Again, one of the top Canadian receivers in the CFL. You would think that would be the big 1-2 punch. And then the reports came out that the Bombers were expected to sign Kenny Lawler to a 2-year deal. Former Bomber, went to the Elks last year, put up 894 yards in just 12 games there, 5 touchdowns for him. That is a stacked top 3 wide receivers in Schoen, Lawler, and Dembski. And they've got some really good depth too. Canadians, Drew Wolotarski, Brendan O'Leary-Orange. I really like those guys as well. Carlton Agudosi only played 2 games last year, but put up 2 touchdowns. He could be primed for more of a role here coming back from injury. And Janarian Grant, explosive returner that could get a spell in on offense there. So they'll be without Greg Ellingson. Looks like Rasheed Bailey is on the way out as well in free agency for the Bombers. But I don't think there's any concerns here about the depth at this particular position for them. So now that we've gone through what all the teams have for needs and where they stack up, let's take a quick look at the list of free agents here and see which names are available. And there are some big names out there on this list, and the biggest 2 are Eugene Lewis and Tim White. 1,300 yards, 1,265 yards. These guys were the top tier receivers in the CFL last season. They were their go-to receivers on their respective teams. And teams around the league got to be pushing hard to bring in one of these guys because they are absolute game breakers for you. You've got a couple of veteran receivers here that, I think teams could be looking at to bring in that are definitely still able to produce. Darvin Adams, he's up there, 33 years of age. Darrell Walker, Greg Ellingson is 34. Kamar Jordan, also 34. These guys have been in the league for a while now, and they've been producing over their time in the league. And I think a team looking for a bit of that veteran presence and maybe giving one of these guys a shot for a bounce back season. Kamar Jordan, a bit of a disappointing year last year for him. Greg Ellingson missed a lot due to injury. Darrell Walker has had a couple up and down seasons there. So I think these guys still have the talent and they can still definitely play ball, and there will definitely be teams taking a look at them this offseason. A few more underrated pieces to look at wide receiver, I think, are Rashid Bailey and Reggie White Jr. Rashid Bailey is kind of that unknown, underappreciated guy in Winnipeg. Was the past few years. It was all, it was Nick Dembski last year, was the Dalton Schoen show, Greg Ellingson to some extent there, Kenny Lawler when he was there. Well, Bailey produced a very solid 729 yards last year and 9 touchdowns. Reggie White Jr., same thing. Everybody talked to Eugene Lewis and Jake Winicki, but Reggie White, 722 yards in 15 games last year was a very good year for him there as well at only 26 years of age. So has a bright future ahead of him there. Talked a little bit earlier about a number of Saskatchewan Rough Riders that are going to be headed to free agency. Shaq Evans and Duke Williams. Both of them only played about half the season last year. They had some injury issues, and that offense struggled at times. But if you go back and look at previous years in their career, yeah, these are two of the guys that can definitely be a very integral piece of an offense and make a huge difference. So, when you look at these charts here and the stats don't necessarily show them as a top tier option, it was a down year. They are definitely still top tier options available to teams. Let's talk Canadians here at the wide receiver spot. Most of the top names have been taken off the board already. Nick Dembski's gone. Curly Gittins Jr., Kion Julian Grant. These were all pending free agents that have already re-signed with their current teams. But there are some interesting options here as well. Hergy Mayala seemed like he had a promising career ahead of him over in Calgary. And expected big things from him last year with Montreal, but not necessarily what we expected to some extent. Still a solid year, though, at 409 yards in 18 games there for him. Shaq Johnson, same thing. He's bounced around from BC to Ottawa, and early in the season got more involved in that Red Blacks offense, but that kind of tailed off down the stretch. Justin McInnes, some bright spots with the Riders last year as well. Same thing with Mitchell Picton, another Riders Canadian wide receiver there. And Jawan Breskison and Lamar Durant are two of the guys that, go back a couple of years ago, we were talking as the top two arguably Canadian wide receivers in the CFL. Breskison's had both of them really have had a bunch of injury troubles. Durant played 11 games only last year. Breskison played 6. I think they kind of got eased back into the lineup a little bit and didn't get into full roles with their teams. But these are guys that have produced in the past. That's the common theme here of do you take a chance on one of those guys and bring them in? And I think they're worth it. I really do. Other options here at wide receiver to look at, Ryan Davis, Sean Bain here kind of in the middle. Those are, again, two guys, rookie year 2021. Seemed like there was some promising play there from them. Both utilized the receiver and return game. So if you're a team that needs, a new kick returner, and maybe that's a team like the Edmonton Elks looks to bring in one of these guys, I could see happening, to fill kind of that dual role there. And then we've got RJ Harris, former, I believe, 1,000-yard receiver for the Red Blacks. Only played 5 games last year due to injury, 175 yards for him. Eric Rogers, another guy, only 1 game last year, 30 yards. He's had a ton of injury problems. If a team's willing to take a chance, bring him in, try him out in training camp, could pay off to bring in some of these former 1,000-yard receivers. But I don't know if I would hedge all of my bets on them given their injury history at the position to be the number one guy. I would probably, focus on some of these guys at the top of the charts here at wide receiver. So that's where all the teams stand right now heading into CFL Free Agency officially, which officially kicks off February 14th at, I believe, noon Eastern time. Obviously, there will be plenty of movement over the next couple of days here as well, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that. Make sure to subscribe over here on the YouTube channel and tune into our other positional previews. The quarterback and running back previews are up already. And tomorrow I'll be previewing the offensive linemen. So that's obviously a big piece that teams need to focus on in the offseason. We'll go through the options available there right here. Same place as you can find all of our content here. Make sure you check out CFL Free Agent Frenzy 2023. We'll be live again, 8 hours, February 14th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Follow us on all the social media platforms as well at CF Countdown Pod. And let us know in the comments section. What do you think is going to happen at wide receiver? What you'd like to see happen? Are you happy with where your team is sitting now? Who would you like them to bring in? Let us know there or on social media as well. And stay tuned for plenty of content to come here on the Canadian Football Countdown.